We are doing something a little different today. We are going to be ranking the characters of Not Me. Now, I have got 16 people to rank. That might be more than what you have. Maybe you have even more characters to rank. Of course, there will always be a bias in this, so those characters that I connected more with, I enjoyed more with, will of course be higher up. But I will still try to look at also the importance they had to the story, because that will then decide that certain characters may go up a few, down a few, but I definitely will be at least looking into elements of their story. And if I wanted more, if it was the right amount, and if the characters really related to me. In joint last place, in 16th and 15th place, is Black and White's parents. I put them together because really and truly I didn't see how I could separate one from the other. I think, unfortunately, they just weren't in the story enough. I needed a lot more from them. We got obviously them at the beginning and they have their argument, and then the twins are separated for 10 years. We're never given a reason why they're separated. They never show really paternal or maternal instincts towards their children from what we see. And we only really have the father in the beginning and then the mother right near the end. And it just didn't feel important enough. We needed to see a little bit more. We got the understanding that they both are in positions of power. So, of course, they're going to view situations different to their sons. They also come from a place of privilege. I would say we got a little bit more from the mother in that she was a judge and it was clear she knew what was going on, and maybe something had happened to Black or the twins, but there just wasn't enough. I would love to have had flashbacks more, at least to White and Black growing up, White in Russia, Black in Thailand, just to see what went on, especially between Black and his mother. And that's a part I felt really needed fleshing out. And so for that, those two are in last position. In 14th place is Tawi's right hand man, Techit. Again, a character that's just not in it enough. We get the sense that he's dangerous. It's very clear that's why he is the right hand man. But again, it's just not enough. You know, and then he's just kind of in it and then not, and we know he got arrested. But at least with his character, we got more sense of danger from him, that he was more of a threat. But in terms of the overall story, anyone could have played that character or that position, and it just would have given the same results. So I wish we had seen him in it more. If we had seen him in it more, I think we would have got a bigger sense of just how dangerous he could be. And so for that, he falls into 14th position. Coming in 13th, so that's unlucky for some and unlucky for this character, is Nemo. I do like that she was an artist, that she was independent. We, I felt bad for her when she found out about Sean and White and how much it hurt because she cared for Sean. And what was really interesting is after Sean was hurt by this time Black, without realizing it's Black, she was there for him while still being hurt and fresh from what she found out, while Sean was showing his hatred and his art and the graffiti. She was showing that love can blossom from it. And a nice contrast was that she would add a lighter color, a red, a pink. So something that's contrasting from the black. And that kind of felt like it represented her character, which she would find light and hope and beauty within things. I do think we could have had her more. But the problem is, I just don't know how we could have had her more. And that's why she falls into this position. Because though I liked her as a character, it was so minimal. And I was stuck in where they could really go with her. Because you actually could have taken out a lot of her scenes and she still would have had the same impact. But we needed her to be Sean's go to. We needed Sean to have someone to talk to. And then there was the sense that they were an item at some point, or they liked one another. So again, that felt like a red herring. This show seems to do that a lot. But I think in the overall scope of it, she wasn't important enough for the main thread for her to really place any higher. Now, the next two I struggled. I switched them back and forth, but then I decided this character technically played less of importance in the story. So coming in at number 12 is Yok's mum. I was so happy to see representation for the deaf community, for someone with a disability, to show how they're mistreated and what they go through and the struggles. And I just love that she loved Yok. She cared for her son. We saw her lose her job, the way she was treated. Then she gets a new job and it's with Tawi, which then is a conflict for Yok because of clearly his distrust and dislike of him, but plus what they're trying to do with the gang. And the conflict of his mother losing a job, because once he does what he does, he knows that she's going to lose work, going to lose money. They need money. They need to eat. They need to survive. And she creates a great mini source of regret and a little bit of conflict, but not enough, between Sean and Yok, where Sean feels guilty because of their plan. And in Yok's understanding that this was bound to happen, she comes across as so kind, but also so tired. And I feel like she was such a good representation for the deaf community, and that there was representation, plus she was showing the stigma that comes with having a disability. And I think they played it off really well in the show. Plus, Yok loves his mother so much that he would only bring people that he trusts around her, and he always wants her safe. I do wish we had seen her a little bit more, just really because I loved the character and I wanted to see her more in it. But hopefully, she is with Yok and Dan and they're a happy family. Coming in at number 11 is the one they all talk about in this show, Tawi. We know he's up to no good. The gang is very adamant, especially Sean, and we know Sean's reasoning as the show goes on. For me, Tawi, for such an important figure, just was not dangerous enough for me, the feeling of him. Tedget felt more dangerous. Todd was clearly more dangerous than him. It felt, we know Tawi had power, and we know he was doing nefarious things. And then we know, especially with drugs, what it culminated in. But I never got that sense of how dangerous he could be. I wish we had seen a bit more of that in scenes. He was very understanding of his political image and his social standing, so he didn't have to be aggressive towards people. But I wish during the bathroom scene between Sean and Tawi, there's a little bit of a switch. Just a moment where he switches his tone, his eyes, the way he looks, just so the audience could take that step back and go, he really is a threat. And he really was a threat. There's a reason the gang wanted him out. They wanted to take him down and the power he had. It wasn't just the gang. Todd wanted him out too. The unfortunate thing is I just never got that sense from him. And for someone who was such a figurehead, the main technically driving force for the story, I needed more. And so for that, he just misses out on the top 10. Coming in at number 10, and I do have to say this is probably a bit again of my bias, which is Nutch. I just loved her character. She's probably the only character I can say had the right amount of screen time from the supporting cast. There was nowhere else she really needed to go, because once they moved away from the university setting, she didn't really need to be in it. She was quite sporadic, but it worked because she was obviously fighting against the system. But it was only at times where they had those gatherings that she was needed. I loved the chemistry between her, Graham, and White when they were at university. She was always the opposition to Graham's viewpoint, but it was not to say that Graham was wrong. What she was trying to do was open Graham's eyes up to there are two sides of the story. Doesn't mean either side are 100% correct, but you must take in both sides. And that's what I liked. She was someone who took in both sides. And she was never taking one side over the other. And she would always give pros and cons to situations, which meant she thought about the bigger picture, which is the gang's biggest flaw, is that they had such a tunnel vision. She saw it in a wider scope, and then having White there and having him be more on her side in terms of the viewpoint worked because it opened Graham's eyes up. Plus, I loved that she was just treated like anyone else, and they would joke about, and the friendship between, especially her and Graham, felt so real. And another thing that bumped her up was her questions to Tawi when he did the presentation. She asked the question, and what I loved is she wasn't satisfied. She could tell that he wasn't saying what he needed to say. He was saying what he thought needed to be said. There's a difference when you think something needs to be said to what you should be truly saying. She was just, for me, such a great relief and breath of fresh air for a character. And she never thought herself more important than someone else. She just had a viewpoint, and she was a very smart character. Coming in at number 9, and it may be controversial for some of you, that's Graham. I think he played a very important part at the beginning. He's a member of the gang, so of course he's going to be important. There's a reason they all came together. I felt like he came from maybe a similar background to Black and White. I felt like he also might have been one of the only ones to have both sets of parents. We never really knew if he did or didn't in the show, but it looked like he had more of a comfortable life than a lot of the other characters. I felt they were going to go more with his character when he watched White jump over the wall, and I thought maybe that was going to play more into his confusion of how Black couldn't do that, considering the Black he knows would. And he seemed to be the only one who really liked Black in the gang, at first, at least anyway. But the unfortunate thing is, he then falls by the wayside. I never connected with his story with Eugene. I had no problem with them dating. I don't see a problem with it. I just felt once that happened, he became less important to the gang, and it was just more his and Eugene's story instead of the goals he wanted to achieve. I mean, did we really know fully his goals? I felt like we never truly did. And sometimes he was a bit pushy with Eugene in wanting, her to get out of the headspace of Black and into thinking Graham could be there. Another thing was he just felt so unimportant near the end that I was just like, if his character disappeared for a bit, it wouldn't change the story. They did something very interesting as well, which is they had a moment where White as Black and Graham looked at one another, and it felt like a tension and heated exchange of looks. And then obviously we find the note saying more than friends, and it's a red herring for you to think Black and Graham. And they make it very, very clear, especially when they go to the gathering for equality, that Graham is interested in Eugene. But it just didn't make sense why they needed that heated look. And once he got in with Eugene, there was nothing of his character that I felt important. Unfortunately, he just really did fall by the wayside. At number 8 is Eugene. And the reason I placed her higher than Graham, even though he is a main core member of the gang, is her connection to Black. Because that gave us a little snippet of a backstory between them. And that Black could show a caring side to someone who isn't family. And it was clear that he did care for Eugene. And that's why he wanted to protect her, especially when he wakes up. I like that we got her interpretation through dance, through what was going on. I like that, she told Graham to kind of back away with the situation, let her heal from the breakup with Black, that she was independent, that she had her own voice. So when the breakup happens, it's hurtful to see her like that, because the way White does it, he tries to do it as Black, and we know Black has hurt her, so we know she's been through hurt. But also, the instance where she's drunk and Graham kisses her, she thinks she kissed Graham. So she holds herself accountable for the situation. We never see Graham do that, and that's another reason why she places higher than he does. But I do think there could have been more importance of her used, because once it just became her and Graham, she lost a little bit of that spark, because then it was just making it like a couple, and she already had her own identity. And as you can see, she is my top ranked female character as well. At number 7 is Gunpowder. Now, this is getting hard to rank the characters. I really like the character of Gunpowder a lot. He was so mysterious. He was the most mysterious character, I think, of the gang. He seemed to have some sort of military or police training. There was some ex-army, whatever it was, training that he had. Plus, he'd clearly been doing this for a while. He was older than everyone else. And he mentions at the last episode that he's going to train the next generation. So he's there as almost a freedom fighter. And that's why he places 7th. Because it was so mysterious, but we never truly got an answer. Which leaves it a bit frustrating, because I just want to know so much more about his character, because he trained the gang for quite a while and was really training them in all different elements to make sure that they had the quickest escape, the best routes, the best fighting abilities. So where did he get all this training? He also seemed to get information from people, which made you go, who do you know? And how do you know them? And who is helping you? And also it made him suspicious at points, because he was so mysterious as a character. And so for that, I wish we had really gotten to know him more, because he was just so interesting as a character, because he knew what was going on around him. He was the one that everyone kind of came to talk to and came to speak to, not just because he was older, but because he was the most level-headed. He didn't think irrationally, usually. Like, maybe elements he might have, say, when they all were about to be captured. But in a general sense, he was so level-headed. He observed things and figured things out for himself. He just didn't tell them. He let them figure it out. Especially what he knew was budding between White and Sean. And I think the actor did such a good job in portraying Gunpowder, especially this parental figure for them, because most of them did not have parents, especially a father. Like, not one of those characters did we see actually have a good father figure. We never knew about Graham's, but the others were either dead or not there, or just neglectful. And he was there for them. And that's what makes him important as well, because they would have been so lost without him. Plus, his garage was the center point of their meetings. Now, did he earn money by fixing people's cars and motorbikes? I don't know what job he did to keep that place open, but it was mainly an opening shot, and that was their established hangout. So without him, they wouldn't have got as far as they did. In at number 6, Dan. Now, Dan became more prevalent as the show went along. We got to see a breakdown of him when he was being painted nude, understanding that he's gone through stuff, and then as it goes along, we find out that he is the one who killed Sean's father. And there's a lot of controversy, I think, around this moment, and I think a lot of people wanted him to die as retribution. The issue I have with that is people are too narrow-minded in how they viewed that situation, because you can view it as he shouldn't, if he was so trigger happy, had a gun on him, because it resulted in Sean's father's death. At the same time, Sean's father also had drugs on him and ran. And you just kind of, in that moment, think, why are you running? Because there's always a chance someone's going to shoot you. And in this case, it was Dan. Now, he could have shot Sean's father in the leg, or the arm, or somewhere else. But it was also supposed to give you that sense of connection to Sean and to the story. Plus, he was a police officer, so he always had a position of power. Doesn't mean he was happy with it, but we were always given that people in power are not good. They do underhanded, nefarious things. And with Dan, we saw someone who became disengaged with his police work and in fact was trying to rebel in his way of being an artist, a graffiti artist. Of course, they did a good job, I felt, as it went along. I wasn't someone who fell for the Dan Yock coupling for quite a while because they just weren't in it enough. And then as it went on, you got to see the connection between them. Plus, we got the moment where he betrays them, but then we find out that betrayal also entails him being captured and his parents being threatened. Even if they're not there, it's a failed threat that the parents would have been killed. And this is the whole idea about who's in power and the control they have and what position you play. You may think you have power, but there's someone above you. And that's Dan was also a pawn in this. But you also can't take away that he still did kill someone. Yeah, but there's just many layers to his character. He was someone who definitely felt like he was seeking retribution. He was seeking forgiveness. He wasn't walking around with a chip on his shoulder. He was walking around with actual sadness for what he did, for a loss of his passion, of his job, to his guilt of what he did to Sean's father, his worry about his parents being killed, plus him falling in love with Yock. And it was very clear he did. And at least he got a punch from Yock from it. Yock didn't just let him off particularly easy, but we also saw that he left the police force and he was now trying to change himself and get away from those people that have that power and create his own narrative. And that's why, for me, he places sixth. Because I feel like the top five just have more importance overall, and I connected with them more. In at number 5, the real villain and an antagonist of the show, and the one with the power. He either spells it with 1D or 2Ds, look online. It's Todd. I think Singh did a good job as Todd. I will say, and let's be honest, did anyone think he wasn't the antagonist? I mean, in every opening part that you get in the show, in the poster that they show the image, he's got a smirk on his face that's very clearly indicative of someone who's up to no good. We meet Todd as a kid very quickly, and then again when he's an adult. He tried to help White, but yet he didn't know enough about the gang. And that's where it became suspicious, where you would just think straight away, there's elements you know of Black. You know Black as a person. So you know what he looks like, how he walks, his mannerisms, but you don't know anything about the gang. If you were truly, really close to Black, you should know those elements. You should know more about the gang. Plus, he just always came across as someone with just wealth, who just used his money and his power and not for good things. He was very frivolous, and we saw that. And he was always a little bit sneaky, wasn't he, with White, where he was trying to create a stir with the situation. And he was also trying to find out way too much information about the gang. And that's what made you suspicious at the beginning, because it made you go, is he working with Tawi? Why does he want to gain all of this intel, all of this information? And as we find out, it's so that he can take control and make sure he knew what the gang was up to, because he wanted all the power, and he was going to take Tawi out himself and have the gang look like they're the bad guys. So he had a plan all along. And he was actually such a great antagonist in the show as it built up. He drugged Black, and when Black woke up, so he was able to take Black out, which is, Black was supposed to be the strongest person out of the group. So for him to be taken out, obviously after waking up months in a coma and being drugged, he's not going to be at 100%. But Todd was more dangerous than was let on. He was apt at fighting. He had the money. He had the people around him. And he was very arrogant and very smug. And he was a representation of those with money and just what they believe they can achieve and do and have no repercussions. Plus, we saw Black and Todd together in a flashback, which was really nice to show that they at one point had very similar viewpoints on the world until lust and greed took over Todd, which happens. You want that power. When you know you can get it, you really change. And we definitely got a sense that Todd cared for Black, They did make it seem at points that it could be romantic, such as when he was looking at Black in the hospital bed with a smile on his face. Plus, he didn't kill Black, he could have. And it always felt like there was a bit more than friendship that he felt for Black. They definitely cared for one another because Black was clearly hurt. And just Todd played such a great antagonist because we were led to believe someone else was the person in power. But as the episodes went along, you could sense that he was more dangerous. And they presented him as more dangerous as the show went along. And in the end, he's in a coma. Black puts him in a coma. And so it gives you that story of, well, if he wakes up, who would he go after? Would he go after Black? Would he go after White? Sean? He would definitely have revenge on his mind. And I think Todd's character was a great show of how you can corrupt someone, especially because he took over what his father's business was, but it always felt nefarious and underhanded. And if he knew Tawi and Tawi was doing what he was doing, then Todd was also up to no good. And it was him trying to convince Black of how, it's okay what he's doing in that flashback. I really like that flashback. It really layered both characters and showed that there was a genuine friendship between them. And Todd was so important to the story, and it snuck in as well, because you just kind of viewed him as someone trying to get intel. Does he work for Tawi? To, oh no, he's the real threat. He's the one who actually holds all the cards, and he must be taken out, because if you don't take Todd out, he will flip everything, and the gang then becomes the villains in everyone's eyes. And that's what I like, that he had so much power, and it was so gradual that you understood that. You always knew he wasn't going to be a good person, but you didn't know to what extent he could damage someone. And so for that, he has to place high up on my list. We have 4 characters left. That is White, Black, Sean, and Yuck. I'm curious if the rest of you, these 4 would have been your top 4. Maybe, maybe not. This might be a controversial one. Coming in at number 4 is Black. I think when we see him as a kid, we see that he always defends White. And that he even says at one point he can't always be the defense for White. And we know that because obviously they live apart for 10 years, 10 odd plus years. And within that time, something has really changed within Black. He intimidates people. People are afraid of him. He is shown in flashbacks here and there to show that he has this demeanor of, I just don't care. And he does it in such a way, the way his body is held, the way he looks, the way he speaks, works. The character of Black is such a fascinating character. And I think they did a perfect job when they woke him up. They did not need to do it any later than that, because it wouldn't have worked. We got enough episodes to really, really get to know his character, and I applaud the show for doing that, for waking him up at the perfect time. When we are first introduced back into him, when he's in the present timeline, you can understand why people don't like him, because he gives off very much I don't care about you aura, apart from his care for White. But also just the damage he causes from when he wakes up. He takes out some goons. He also completely messes up Sean's face and beats him up so badly. And I think on purpose we're given that sense of, oh, I understand why people don't like him. You're not supposed to be on Black's side at the beginning of when he wakes up, because he's just woken up. So the only things we know about him is he felt like the leader, or he always made the plans. He didn't care about anyone but himself. Even though we did see a little flashback where he cared for Eugene, he was just that character that you didn't know how to take them. And then as it went on, you really did get to understand a lot better what he's been through with certain characters. Also, we got to see just how much he actually cares for White. It was always look after White, make sure you look after White. Plus, you got to understand why he attacked Sean, with everything going on, and White being in danger, like the thing he cares about the most. Of course, he's going to have that reaction. That's just kind of what they are. They're quite aggressive people. And then as it went on, he unraveled the story, and you saw that the group just didn't need him. And so you got a sense that he now felt like the outsider. And of course, he doesn't show it, but it does really represent, the shift for his character. Plus, I felt sad for him that he disappears and comes back at the end after 3 weeks. But it's like, why run? If Todd wakes up, he's going to seek not just you, but the ones you love. Also, it just would have been nice for him to have his twin around for a little bit longer. But they did do a nice moment where they had a sit down between them. And so for Black, the reason he's so high up is he is clearly an integral part of the story. He's put in a coma clearly to bring White into the story. And then when he wakes up, you see the damage. I mean, he beats the crap out of that huge police officer who's several inches bigger than him and taller than him, and he does it with ease. And that shows you the strength that Black has. So when he is defeated by Sean and Todd, it's a big shock because it's clear that he's super strong. And especially the more he gains his strength back, the more he's awake, the more he's a threat. And he's always been a threat to other people, and it's clear that he's the reason the group came together. And so I would love to know more of his backstory with Tawi, if there is, and the mother. I wish they had incorporated that into it a lot more. I feel like that would have really made us understand even more how he became the person he did. Like, what happened to him for him to just shut everyone off. And Gunn does such an amazing job with Black that when you first meet Black, when he wakes up, you are kind of on guard with him to the point by the end you're supporting him. And you want him to win. And you're realizing that there's layers to him and that he really does care. And you could see it also how hurt he is by Todd. Because that was a friend. And I don't think he considers many people friends. And I think Todd was genuinely his closest friend because they were friends since they were kids. So to be betrayed by the person that, though the gang may not have known about, but that was clearly intentional, that he kept someone else on the back burner just in case he needed help here and there. Black was very smart. Unfortunately, though, he put himself in situations where he would get hurt, and in that case he got put into a coma. So he's not in it for a majority of the show, and that's also why he's not higher up. But he's still number 4. Number 3 has to be Yok. The reason he falls so high up is I genuinely enjoyed his character development. He had one of the best character developments. Be it good, be it bad, whatever it was development. I loved his relationship with his mother. I loved that he was there for her. I loved that he knew sign language. So that gave a bridge between the deaf community and the hearing community. He was on the poorer side of society. And we know he loved art. And he was really good at it. A negative for him is he wears his heart on his sleeve. That's also a positive. But in this case, he wore his heart on his sleeve too much for Dan, to the point where he was willing to leave the gang, plus turn against Sean, and not listen to Sean's worries about having a police officer in this gang when they're doing illegal things. And that was a big flaw for York, which was he just fell in love way too quickly, and that was it. That all he saw was Dan. And it was instant love at first sight, as they say. He's also a wild card. I think as the show went along, they did a better job as well with incorporating his and Dan's relationship. Plus, after he's been shot and he's in hospital and he's been betrayed by Dan, was such a sad moment for York. And my heart went out for him, and the actor did such a good job of showing York's just absolute devastation. Again, he wears his heart on his sleeve. He was in love at first sight. This person broke his heart. And that's always going to happen with York. It's when he falls in love fast. So he was always going to get hurt. Plus, he was an integral part of the gang. In fact, from the first time he meets White as Black, he was super antagonistic towards him. That I thought they were going to have the most conflict out of everyone. Like, he did not like Black. But then that kind of just disappeared, really, if you think about it. It was like, that kind of energy should have been kept up. It shouldn't have been in the first episode and then just disappeared, and it did. Like, he definitely felt like he had the most against Black, the most hatred towards him. And then it kind of just melded in with the group. He was definitely a very important member. In fact, I would say he was definitely, I would still call him a main couple. Like him and Dan were a main couple, and we got to see the training with him. We got to see him question why Black was the way he was. He started standing up for himself, and it felt as if the he was part of the reason the gang would come together. Um, but it was sad because there were conflict between him and Sean as it went on because of Dan. And I felt like if he just didn't have blinkers on, he would have seen that Sean had a right to feel that Dan shouldn't be included. But Yok was just such a fascinating character. He was up, down, he was all around. He got chased, he got shot, he got handcuffed, he painted someone. That was a good scene when he painted Dan in the nude in their hideout, which is right next to the police station. But it gave a sense for these two that you could understand their connection. And it was in those moments that I was like, I get them now as a couple. I want to see more. And that's what I was felt with Yok. I wanted to see more. Be good or bad, I don't care. I enjoyed his character, and that's why he falls in at number 3. That's right, we're down to our top 2. Sean and White. My number 2 is White. White is clearly the biggest plot device, thread, main character out of the whole show. He is the glue that holds the show together. We pick up years later, and he's speaking Russian, so he's learned to speak another language, which, we know the Gun actually spoke and had someone train him in how to speak that. White was such a fascinating character because he came from a life of privilege, and quite quickly he figured out the elements of that privilege and just what it meant for him and how he lived his life and what kind of blinkers he had on, to his conflict with his father, which you can see he didn't want to be a clone of his dad. He wanted to be his own independent person. And as he got to meet the gang, he quickly realized just, how other people suffer and how much he actually wants to help. And then, his interactions with Sean straight away. His interactions are just magnificent because you get the bond between them straight away. Even though it's hatred at first, there's a bond and there's a connection and the tension is there. Plus, what I really liked is he's told about Black to a degree by Todd, but clearly not enough for you to think, well, Todd doesn't know Black that well, at least not anymore. And watching White pretend to be Black and his mannerisms, and clearly not knowing little details like how to jump over that wall, or maybe how Black would react to a situation, was fantastic. It was so good because it was White pretending to be Black and who he thinks Black is and how he would act, but is not. And so it added many layers. Plus, we got a nice slow build up of his relationship with Sean, and I appreciate that. It was not just there. It took time, and we got to see it build up. And so it wasn't just thrown in our face. There, it wasn't fluff. It was angst. It was hurt. It was pain. It was understanding. It was comfort. And it culminated in love in the end. And that's what really propels this character, because he was the voice of reason. White was trying to help out, and he was seeing a bigger picture, and he was saying, if we do these things, this is the possibility. White was so intelligent. Plus, he always tried to look at the bigger picture. So he looked at both sides. He never wanted to look at one side and think one side was right and the other side was wrong. That was just too black and white. There are greys, and he was in the grey area on thought. And I like that he had to wear glasses. So obviously he put contacts in to be black, and then the tattoo that he got, he really tried to be his brother, but it backfired in the end because he was not loving the life of Black, but he wanted to be himself, but be around the people and the gang, but as himself. And I absolutely love the relationship between him and Sean and just how it developed and just how long it took and the feelings they had for one another and how they tried to communicate that and the comfort they sought. And then when they did become an item, they were very clingy. White loved to hug Sean. He loved to show affection. It's clear that White's modem of affection is touch, it is comfort. Something that I don't think he got much of growing up either, by the looks of things. He turned out to be a sweeter soul. Plus, if it wasn't for him with how he took the pictures and what they wanted to put into the drinking system, it would have backfired on them. Plus, after being beaten up by Sean, technically he got Sean to reveal why he was so passionate about his plan. And that kind of really layered all of the gang and really cemented. And then he really brought the gang together because they saw a different Black, and that inspired them. And so he became an inspiration and a comfort to the group, where they didn't feel afraid. They felt they could talk to White and they could communicate. And even when they found out, they were obviously shocked, and there were some comedy moments when they're looking. But they grew to know White's personality. Even if they thought he was Black, it was very clear that he wasn't. It's just, you don't think of twins. And he was always trying to help out. He was always trying to save Black. He was trying to save Sean. He is the reason Sean wanted to live in the end. That's a huge thing. You help someone want to actually see what life could be and not just die. And obviously we got the moments when they jump, when they're doing parkour with the wires that you see in the behind the scenes, to the ending where it's just perfect for their characters. And I just think Sean and White created a just magnificent thing. White was such a developed character, and I don't think there's anything that needed to be added to him. I actually was okay with less of his backstory than Black's in flashbacks, because we got so much of White, and I felt they really gave many dimensions to mannerisms of White and just what he actually did for the gang. And clearly Gunpowder knew this. If you look back as well, he saw what White was doing, and the fact that he wants to fight for the betterment of people. And if it wasn't for White, those people wouldn't have been there when they were captured in the van, about to be executed probably. They could have ended the show with them dying like that, and I've heard there was a good chance that could have happened. And instead, if it wasn't for White creating that, was it Twitter? They wouldn't have figured out. Like, he actually was thinking beyond the bigger picture. He was using social media to garner attention and to show Tawi for what he was. If it wasn't for White, a lot of people wouldn't have known. So White truly was a fighter against the system. It just took him longer than the others. My number one is Sean. I do think in big part it is to Off's acting. I just was so impressed and immersed in his acting and how professional he's become, how developed Off has come. And I just felt for Sean. When we meet Sean, he's about to punch White, thinking he's Black. It's confusing sometimes trying to say Black, White. And from there, there's that clear animosity between them that for Sean builds into curiosity, that then builds into feelings, to passion, to eventually culminating in love. And he's just such a tragic figure, but such a well-rounded character as well. He's got a hard edge to him, and he's so determined to take Tawi out. And we know, because of Tawi, he lost his family, he lost everything. He lost the will to live. So really, Sean was looking for a way to die, but making sure that he takes Tawi out at the same time. And then we saw him let loose and, kind of become softer. I mean, at one point, he dresses up very smartly, because something that the show did was allow us to see them without really, the makeup that actors wear. So they're dirty, they're greasy, all the imperfections, which makes them perfect. And when he dresses up to see White and they're under the flag, and that's a realization for Sean and a moment of clarity for him that he does have feelings for White, and it's romantic, and they build up on that side, but they never drop the reason he's in this gang. They never let that romance be a detriment, and that's what I appreciate. Sean is always fighting for others, plus himself. But as time goes along, instead of it just being for him, that's when he starts incorporating the bigger picture. Once he starts having a reason to live, we see that Sean is looking beyond just, his own mortality. Plus, his story is just so sad because of the loss of everything that he held dear to him and how. Plus, the confrontation with Tawi was really well on his part. I think Off did a great job in showing the anger in Sean and the resentment and the hurt. And then we saw that get broken down by White bit by bit, but it was never forced upon us. And his character just really spoke to me because we also saw when he felt guilt over Yock's mum losing her job. So it showed that he did care. And within the gang, he always had this vision. And once he could start expressing that, it made it was a good thing. It got it out of him. It got all of that. Plus, we got to see him confess about what happened to his parents. Everyone started to understand more about Sean in the gang, and he lived with Gunpowder. He had nowhere else to go, but he made it work, and he never gave up on what he wanted to achieve. It's just when White came into the picture, he found a new lease on life. And the acting was just phenomenal to me because I never got angry really at Sean. I always just felt like there were reasons for that. And then when he got beat up by Black, that was a hard moment to watch because he never fought back. He had given everything to White, who he thought was Black in that moment, to have this person that he truly loves. And it's been a long time since he loved someone. And for them to do what they did and to leave him completely broken and bloodied and bruised and just not fight back was hard to watch because it was clear he kept calling Black's name. And he didn't understand, but it was also softness to it. He didn't even try to fight back, considering we saw him fight White and win. And so him getting confused of what's going on, and then like, a lot of looks between them and build up. I felt like Sean is one of those characters that I will remember for a long time to come because there is just many layers to him. I just really love what Off did, and I think you could see that he really tried to get to the crux of who Sean was. And Sean was a very complex character and a very hard character. And then we got to see that breakdown and more of his story and find out what was going on. And I just think overall he was the one that captivated me the most. And that is my number one. I'm curious about your rankings. Don't forget, this is just my ranking. Does not mean this is a correct ranking. This is just my ranking. But I'm curious what your ranking is. You don't have to do all 16 characters. You could do whoever you want to do. I also want to put this out here. Who did you think was going to die? And who did you want to die? I thought Dan, Black, or Sean or White, one of those would die. Because that would have elevated the story even more and given it a kind of bittersweet, realistic ending. Who did I want to die? That's a hard question. I would say if I had to choose someone, Grant. Because out of the gang, I felt the less connected to him. And that is my character ranking of the Not Me characters.